Well, this is such a special day for all of us. I have to tell you, since the invitations went out, we've had some regrets come in, but I have to tell you that one in particular, probably the warmest wishes for Joanne came from the furthest place, and that's from your granddaughter Sunny in Wellington, New Zealand, who was so proud of you and wishing so badly that she could be here. She sent you her greetings and love. So I want to make sure I say that right up front so I don't forget it. No, we're so glad to have you here. We're very proud of our center here, and there's so many things going on. I think most of you have seen the art exhibit that we have currently, Women in the Arts. If you haven't, we hope that you'll wander around and look a bit later, all during the year for people to enjoy. We also have concerts here about the history of this award and honor here.
The Trails Country Treasure Award started actually 10 years ago, and we're so pleased that on this 10th anniversary that we're honoring the man who came to me when I was president of the board and in a casual conversation said, "Miriam, what do you think about the Art Center supporting an award that we give every year to some very deserving individual who encompasses all of the creative spirit that keeps all of us artists working and interested and energized?" And I said, "That's a great idea." And he really wanted to honor a special lady, an author and a poet, Odina Brennan, who at the age of 96, I hope I can be still writing at the age of 96, was writing every day. She came and she did the most wonderful presentation, reading her poems and just flinging the papers just willy-nilly. It was so fun. And her poems were amazing. And it just opened up this whole idea of doing this annual event. So we have continued to do it for 10 years. And in order of the year that it was presented, we started, like I said, with Odina Brennan. And then next we honored Bill Jones, our Winnsboro historian. Hey, Bill! And then we honored photographers George and Lavana Hitz, and I understand Lavana was not able to make it today, but they were both amazing photographers. And then we honored writer and historian Helen Burlingham. Next was artist and author Graham Hopkins. Some of you know Graham and know about his work. Amazing artist, and he did classes here. And he and Tracy were such great supporters of the Art Center when it first started, and was limping along trying to become what it has now become. And so honoring Graham was a special thing for the Art Center. Next, I was honored. And then in 2012, we honored Lynn and Lindy. And I was hoping that they were going to make it. Lynn and I were emailing or messaging on Facebook, and she said they were going to try, but obviously they couldn't make it. And then in 2013, we honored an amazing fiddler, J.T. Mullinax. And in 2014, were artists Georgia Lang Moore and Al Moore. Yay. And yes, yay! And then in 2015, it was fiber artist and writer Becky Pickett. And I'm not going to announce this year's because that is Helen's job. I introduced Helen Burlingham.
We are really proud to honor Jodan Boyd. First, because he was the founder of the, or had the idea for having this Trails Country Treasure. And it has broadened so that we were able to honor people with different creative specialties. And we hope that this will continue on. Jodan a Winnsborian by birth and by retirement. And we are so proud that he has continued to be with us here in the center, at one time president and on the board, and just a supporter of the arts in every single genre. And instead of going on about his life and all the honors that he's accumulated through writing, through his musicality, through his church work, through his work with the Native American group to get them started. And when you have somebody with that many ideas in their head, but not only the ideas, but the way of making things happen, which is what I think Jodan has done down through the ages. And I would like Jodan to come up and be our award winner for this year. We have several different great pleasure to have Jodan here, and I'm just going to sit down right here and let the others talk about you. And there's a stool there if you want to lean on it.
Okay.
So Jodan, our writer, publisher, poet, musician, storyteller, first president of the FFA, agrarian, champion of the arts, board president in the past, and currently one of our advisors here at the Art Center. It gives me great pleasure to present you with the Trails Country Treasure Award.
Hold on a second, so I have to stay here for a minute. Let me get my camera. Yeah, move it just a little bit closer to the light. Awesome, yes. And tilt that down just a little bit. One more. Wow.
Perfect.
Gotta get it right for the paper.
Are we done with the photos? James, you got your photo?
Yeah, we got it.
All right.
Okay. Jodan, you know all this history, so I don't have to tell you, but I want the folks out here to know. When Trail Country Center of the Arts was organized in 2001, the board adopted a stylized hand as its logo, inspired by a Native American petrific, which symbolized the spirit of creativity. In 2006, TCCA established Trails Country Treasure Award to be presented to those who epitomize the spirit of creativity. For that ceremony, Georgia Langmore designed and made a ceramic plaque in the shape of the organization's logo, and did so each year until 2014, when she was the honoree. We couldn't very well ask her to make her own plaque. And so, to present plaques to Georgia now, Brenda Roberts created a pair of ceramic hands and beautifully framed them, and has done so for subsequent honorees. When TCCA became Winnsboro Center for the Arts in 2008, the board of directors voted to continue designating an annual Trails Country Treasure honoree and the use of the hand logo for that award. So I'm presenting now our new version, Joe, Dan, and this is the plaque, and the hand symbol really is so simple and yet it is so important to us because creativity is what we're all about. And Joe Dan is the epitome of that creativity. So, and I'm told that he made a little pocket back here for you to put any of your memoirs in there. Thank you, Joe Dan.
Dual duty here.
Okay?
You can see the hand also on the back here.
So, Jordan,
Would anybody like to?
Am I on scale right now? I'll say a few words before.
yes, you are, yes, you
Before I
are.
get ghosted.
Okay, yes, you are on, Joe Dan.
Okay. I'll just say that, you know, this photo here was made by Jim Dyson. Some of you know him as Mr. Jim. He has a studio in his home, and he used to do that kind of as a business. It's more of a hobby now. He's retired, but he still has the studio. And Sunny, my granddaughter, you know, who we had our picture made in a studio in Dallas in '93. She was 9 years old at the time. It was my idea to have it done. And we had big and large, two big enlargements made. She had one, I had one. And the one, mine, is now over the bed that she sleeps in when she's with us, when she comes to stay with us. And while she was here a couple of years ago, she got to looking at the date on it, and she said, you know, Poppy, it'll soon be 20 years since we had that picture made. And don't you think we ought to do it again in 20 years, have an anniversary picture? And I told Mr. Jim about it, and he said, hey, come over to the studio and I'll do it. And that's, there was this picture here, was where he made pictures of us together and a few of us separately. And just to say, you know, Mr. Jim is another very creative guy. And he knows photography really good as well. And, you know, all the way from making the picture to, you know, he used to do darkroom work when that was still, and all that, but he's adjusted to the times. And I know that the hand that Georgia makes, you know, and Helen and Mary, I guess, pointed out primarily that, which one of you was talking about how important the hand is in terms of creativity. You know, even for myself, a guy who's a writer, you know, I mean, what am I, at one time, had I been born in a different era, I would have done most of it with a quill, you know, or something, on parchment or something like that. Of course, I started in the era of the manual typewriter, you know, which requires all the fingers. And thanks to Miss Mildred Henry, who taught typing in high school, I learned to type. Didn't really know that I was going to, at that time of my life, I didn't know that I was going to be spending the rest of my life with a keyboard. You know, I surpassed the required 60 words a minute. I don't remember how fast I got. But I've used my hands to do my art all of my entire career, you know. And, you know, it's just amazing when you think about even, where's Margit? You still here? Yeah, you know, she does paintings and sculpture and all kinds of things. She uses her hands. And, you know, how many artists, there aren't many artists who don't use their hands, is what I'm getting at. So this is the universal, true artistic icon, I think. And I took the liberty of making a couple of notes here. I still carry my, I got to keep my ticket for the Berlin Thompson concert. And I came in when, just as it was about to start, and Terry was sitting in the back row, back there, and I got to sit close to her, and we visited some during it. And she told me all about not only Verlin, but his mother, you know, his talented mother. And I became a fan of his mother. And I bought her CD, and I've listened to it numerous times since then. And, you know, she's just a remarkable talent. She really plays the mandolin well, but she's also got what I think is one of the most authentic, raw country music voices. I compared her, I told Terry I compared her to, in my mind, to Molly O'Day, who I think was the greatest female country singer who ever lived. And how does she pronounce it? Darwida?
Darwida.
Darwida. And I think that's maybe some sort of a Native American name.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and you know,
On her mother's side.
you know, I was just taken aback at how talented she was. And of course, Verlin was super talented, plays guitar fast and furious and really precisely well. And you just can't keep from being a fan of his, you know, but his mother is almost as old as I am. Hard to play that man. But I got to thinking, you know, what would I say to people who chose to come here? And I thought, to me, Helen, I got to thinking, what is it that goes into the making of an artist? Maybe even before the artist knows he or she is going to be an artist. And I got to thinking, for me, it was a year and 3 months before Pearl Harbor. I was standing in the house in front of the old country school, Vernon School, that Bill Jones has written about in some of his historical columns. There are a lot of things about Vernon School that we don't know, how it got its name and things like that. But it was one of the many country schools that were all around in these small communities when I was growing up in that long ago era. And the day that I started school, in a frosty early autumn day in 1940, and I was standing at Ralph Tinney's yard in front of that school, which is about a quarter of a mile from where David Stanton, who's holding the camera there, lives now, just a little bit further up the road, heading east. There was a country school called Vernon School. Nobody today remembers why it was called Vernon. But it started its life on the property that Galia Gerner, sitting back there by Pastor Neely, it was Vernon School then, and it was on Gerner property. At that, and my grandfather Tinney, Ambrose Tinney, hired Ford Newton and some other people, friends, as well as some of his own sons, to move that school, tear it down, put it in a mule-drawn wagon, and bring it over to that place in front of, on 4620, in front of Ralph Tinney's house. And they rebuilt it then. And Grandpa Tinney wanted that done so that his children could get home sooner to do farm chores. All the schools, the other schools, were much further away, and it was closer to dark when they got home. This solved that problem. But I went into that school for the first time as a student in September of 1940. And Miss Hazel Ragsdale was the teacher, my first grade teacher. And up above her raised desk, her desk was on a little podium raised about a foot off of the floor. And there was the entire alphabet in large, I'm going to say 8 or 10 inches square, cursive letters, capitals followed by the small. They were in cursive, they were not block print letters, cursive. And, you know, A, B, C, all the way through the alphabet. And I was absolutely captivated by the beauty of just those simple letters. And I couldn't wait to learn how to write them. And Miss Hazel Ragsdale. helped me achieve that dream. And I learned the ABCs. I learned everything that a first grade student learns. Now, Miss Hazel had several other classes. She had the classes from 1 through 5 in that room. That school had 2 rooms then. Miss Irene Ray had the other room, and she took the 6th grade to the 8th grade. And that was a big move from Miss Hazel's room over to Miss Irene's room. But in addition to that, as time went on, Miss Hazel went on to another school after a while, a year or 2, and Miss Olita Burkett came along. And I began to learn more about writing and mathematics and those kind of things from Miss Olita Burkett. And finally, Miss Maybelle Cunningham was the 3rd teacher that I had in the Low Country School. And then I was eligible to move into the big room where Miss Irene Ray, her husband was Leonard Ray, and some of you know, and their daughter Jane Ray Haynes is still active in the Winnsboro community. And she was 1 grade ahead of me, but she and I had a lot in common. We both liked to read comic books, and we liked to listen to the superhero programs on the radio. Now, there were no TV, of course, then. And we listened to programs like Captain Midnight and Tom Mix and his Ross and Stray Shooters. But the thing that I got really interested in during that era was Tom Mix and his Ross and Stray Shooters. So to the degree that I formed a club. There were 3 of us in the club. We had a president, a vice president, and a secretary. And we named the club PSD for President, Vice President. 1, 2, 3. PS Club Ralston, Tom Mix, Ralston Straight Shooters Club, PSV 1, 2, 3. And I took it upon myself to create, write, and distribute a daily newspaper. And I wrote it at each copy individually. We didn't have any way of duplicating things. So I had to write 3 copies of each newspaper on those little nickel tablets that we used to get at Harry's and Delport's, Big Chief, or some of those kind of tablets. And I would write it in pencil, making those cursive letters with my graphite pencil on really rough Big Chief tablet paper. And I made one for each one of us. We had 3 members were myself, Tommy Boyd, my brother, and Wendell Horton, whose sister still lives out on 312, about, I'd say, 10 miles out, on the old Horton home place. And Wendell was like 4 years older than me, and he was, I think Tommy was the vice president and Wendell was the secretary. But nevertheless, I got a lot of experience writing that daily paper, and it wasn't labor. I mean, it was really a labor of love. I enjoyed doing it. We would listen to Tom Mix and the Ross and Straight Shooters on the radio in the evenings when we got home. It was a little 15-minute program, but we learned a lot about ethics from Tom Mix and Ross and Straight Shooters. And I learned a lot about writing and publishing a newspaper as during that era of between 1940 and 1945. So then, after the war ended, Vernon School lasted another year before it consolidated with the Winnsboro Independent School District. So in the 7th grade, I attended Winnsboro at the old North Ward School, 7th grade. And then our class was, the 7th grade class then became the first class. Actually, we did this after the second, when we were in the 8th grade, when they finished the then new Memorial School. The 8th grade, which was us, Big Doyle was a member of that same class. And we moved from North Ward to we were the first class to be in the then new Memorial School. The Memorial School was the only school in the Winnsboro School District that had a cafeteria. And the only one in my entire career in the Winnsboro Independent School District when I ever had a cafeteria at school. So in that era of the 7th and 8th grade, I began to turn to fiction writing. And I would write it again on notebook paper, a little slicker paper than I had on the big cheap pencil. It was a three-ring notebook paper. And I began to write fiction. I had a series of various characters that I created. And I would pass them out to all of my friends in that class. And we would read, and there were 2 or 3 others who did the same thing. Marston and Fanning wrote fiction, and Coy White wrote a little fiction. And 3 or 4 of us were fiction writers for a year. I wrote my first novel, in fact, my only novel, during the 8th grade. And it was called The Atom Man. And it is yet to be published. I still have the original draft of it. I made a cover out of cardboard. I found a big cardboard box and cut out the right size and got some twine string to go through 4 little holes in the cardboard and ran them through the three rings in the paper. And still at the house now, I have my one and only copy, the original of The Atom Man. And it was inspired by the dropping of the atomic bomb. I won't go into the details on it because it may yet be published. But I would say too that this was the time when I began to think about writing somewhat seriously. I would say that I became a serious writer when I was in the 4th and 5th grades at Vernon School, because when I was doing that newspaper, I really felt like that I had a job. It felt like that I was meeting some need, that I was serving some sort of relatively small community. At age 14, which would have been the year that I finished the 8th grade and began to, and that was the year in the fall I started high school. 1948, I had my first byline article appeared in the Farm and Ranch magazine, which at that time was the most popular magazine. Not farm magazine, it was the most popular magazine in this whole Northeast Texas area right around here. Everybody took it, whether you lived in town or on the farm. They always had a fiction story in it. And that was the way all farm magazines were at the time. All of them used to run at least one fiction story in every issue. And the story that I wrote was called Wild Stallion. And that was one that I unfortunately did not keep my original copy of it, but later in a store similar to the Winnsboro Emporium over in Dallas, I found a copy of that edition of Farm and Ranch that had my story in it, and I bought it, and so that I could reproduce it and send it out to some people who were present at the time and remembered it. I'll say that also I was inspired at that age because around that same time, one of my cousins, Welton Tinney, you have to go back quite a ways to remember Welton Tinney, but he was the son of John and Alma Tinney. He was a grandson of Ambrose Tinney, my grandfather. He and I were first cousins. He was quite a bit older. He was probably close to my mother's age. My mother was born in 1913, and she was Ambrose Tinney's youngest child. And Welton Tinney was 20 years older than I was, I guess, something like that. And I came in from work on the farm one day, and I was bringing the mules in to water the mules and then take them to the barn and give them some feed, and then I would come home and eat lunch before going back and hitching them back up again and finishing the day plowing with mules. And when I came to the house, Maud, my aunt who raised me after my mother died, she said, oh, and everybody called Welton Tinney, his nickname was Buster. Buster, everybody knew him as Buster Tinney. And so I'm coming into the house, and Maud is just excited. Buster Tinney sold a story to the Farm and Ranch magazine, and he got $50. Well, this was my first indication that you could get paid. I had no idea that one could make a living writing. That turned the light bulb in my story had appeared in the youth section of the magazine, which did not pay for the contribution. You did get rewarded by getting an upgrade in your membership in the youth section of Farm and Ranch. I became an honor club member when I got that part published. But, you know, it does take back to, and I'll just say that the other people who inspired me at Winnsboro High School, and Terry Matthews, who did a story about some of my background last year, actually, when she did the story, she went to old in high school. The first teacher who inspired me in any way to be an artist was R.W. Warren, Bob Warren. He was single, in his 20s, mid to late 20s, a handsome Mr. Belvedere type. Does anyone know who Mr. Belvedere was? Okay, he was that type of guy. He had a vocabulary exceeding anyone I've ever known before or since, and he used the vocabulary in class. To say he inspired me is pretty good. I wanted to be Mr. Warren. And he inspired me to become a scholar, rather than the class clown that I was trying to be at the time. And then the other one, I had 3 English teachers, all of whom taught me several things that were helpful for me. Lillian Stamps, I had her 2 years in high school English. I had Valley Faye Robinson 1 year. And I had the one and only Gladys Burke. My senior year. She challenged me probably more than any teacher I ever had.
In college.
College or high school.
Graduate school.
And so I credit them with inspiring me greatly to be an artist. But the best right now, do you understand, Miss Burkett was a teacher. I never saw any of her writing at all. Nothing other than what she might write on a paper and grading it. I understand she was a good writer, and probably a great writer. You know, I just never saw any of it. But the best writer I ever met in all of my high school career was Bill Pollard. Bill Pollard was the agricultural teacher, my FFA advisor, who was the greatest change agent in my life. To this day, nothing has changed, no one has changed my life more than Bill Pollard. And when it came to making speeches in the FFA, which was a big thing then, it still is, you know, he could whip out a speech just like that. You know. And so I really learned more about writing from Bill Pollard. You know, the actual writing, practical writing. If somebody says, I want you to give a speech on something, or I want you to give the welcome address at a meeting or something like that. I didn't learn anything like that in any of my English classes. You know, I learned how to diagram sentences, and I learned a lot about the use of the parts of speech, things like that, so that I could write grammatically correct. But Bill Pollard knew how to write in an inspiring way. You know, he could, and he taught me how to do that. To this day, I don't think I've learned more about writing from anybody in my life before or since than from Bill Pollard. And I interviewed him just sometime in the last year. I've been interviewing him for the memoir that I'm going to write to go in the back of that little
Yeah.
I am going to write that if I live long enough. But the thing was that Bill Pollard taught me how to make people react, how to get reactions from people. how to inspire people to do things. And he somehow took me, a guy who had never been any kind of an officer in a class or a small group, not even an officer in the FFA, local FFA, until Bill Pollard came to town. And he somehow inspired me to become the president of the local FFA chapter, and then took me to state, and inspired me to become the state president. And through him, and advice from him, I decided that I would lay out a college for a year and do nothing but be the state FFA president. No one had ever done that before, and it was my campaign promise when I gave my speech, the speech that I learned to write through Bill Pollard. And he listened to me do that speech several times before I gave it. And he was always highly critical. He could spot any kind of an error in delivery as well as composition. He was a big help to me. And had it not been for him, I would never, not only would not have been state president, I never would have been Winnsboro FFA president. So to say that he was a change agent, and then that activity of being the state FFA president followed me throughout my entire career. I ran across people in the 40 years that I wrote for the Farm Journal in not only Texas, but every other state. I worked for 2 years for the FFA magazine in Alexandria, Virginia, before going to the Farm Journal. So it became known that I had been the first full-time state FFA president. And a lot of people knew about that, and it opened a lot of doors for me to get interviews or to get into meetings and things like that. So of all of the teachers that I ever had, I have to credit Bill Pollard being the one that had the most influence on me. I'll take questions now. Or yeah.
Oh, I remember having St. Ago and Terry, Mary and I were high school classmate at Winnsboro High School, and prominent display in the foyer with those FFA plaques of a decade before, national recognition of your work in the Future Farmers of America. And about 20 years ago, when you relocated, come back home, it was an honor to see who was that person behind those plaques that was honored in the lobby over the decades at Winnsboro High School.
Thank you, James Warriors. I'll just say that reminds me of how we all stand on the shoulders of great people. All the ones that I mentioned, every one of them, I'm lifted up by what they gave to me, the teaching and the inspiration. But in addition, I remember when I was sitting in my first year at Winnsboro High School, and I was a green hand in the FFA. That was an official term. You were a green hand your first year. And I was sitting in the classroom. Mr. Johnson was the teacher then. Bill Pollard didn't come along until my second year in Winnsboro High School. But this was Mr. Johnson had one American farmer degree winner in the FFA, and his name was McKay Moore. Some of you probably knew him. He passed away the last few years. And his picture was on the classroom. McKay Moore, American farmer. That's the way I felt here. I wanted to be an American farmer. And eventually it happened. But we're inspired by people to achieve whatever greatness that we can. And if we're not inspired, we probably don't even think about trying to achieve greatness. So I thank you for that comment. It reminds me of how I felt the same way about McKay Moore. Any other questions, or does everyone make a comment? I mean, I'll step down if someone. Well, this has been the tradition. Yeah.
Well, I've said, listen to you and all of your marvels about writing and being an FFA president, all these very, very great accomplishments, but not one word have I heard on your acting.
On acting.
Yes.
Okay, I'm wearing the costume. The hat is also part of the costume. The one time that I appeared as a dramatic actor on this stage, where's Mary Ann?
I'm back here
Yeah,
now.
Mary Ann. Mary Ann was directing Our Town, 2013.
Yeah.
And she was short there were a couple of minor parts that were not yet filmed. And I think she told somebody, hey, you know, Joe Dan Boyd might be interested in doing this. You know, I'm not sure that's the way it happened.
Actually, you can blame Shannon, because Shannon Monk was in the show.
Yeah.
And she said, you know, Mary Ann, you should ask Joe Dan Boyd to play the professor.
That's how it happened. Okay, this is the costume that I wore, in addition to the hat, to play Professor Willard in the Our Town, which is one of the really, really great Thornton Wilder plays.
And you did an awesome job.
I have not, like I guess many people, I haven't had any kind of formal training as an actor, but I did spend a year in high school trying to be the class clown.
Well, there you go.
And, that's sort of acting. And until Bob Warren came along, I probably would have spent my entire high school career trying to be a class clown. But through his inspiration, he actually called me in, along with Joe Bob Blackman, who was my fellow class clown, and after the first 6 weeks, and he told us, just a private conversation between Mr. Warren and the two of us, he said, I'm on to you guys. It's not going to work here, And besides that, I know both of you have the potential to be scholars instead of comedians. And he said, I want you, before you leave this room, to commit to me that you will become a scholar. And, he was the guy, he was the Mr. Belvedere guy that I wanted to emulate. I did want to be just like him. And I wanted to have that kind of vocabulary. And I wanted to be able to use it. And because I'd seen the Belvedere deal, and I liked those movies and everything. It was just right up my alley. But he was a charming guy. He was a single guy at that time, and teaching was his whole passion. He had nothing else really in his life, I don't think, that was really truly meaningful. And he insisted, said, I don't even want you to leave this room until you tell me that you're going to commit to being a scholar, because I know you have the potential. Well, I bought right into it. I didn't have to ask twice. Joe Bob bought into it too, but more reluctantly. Joe Bob was smarter than me. He could make higher grades without studying. In fact, in all of his 4 years in high school, never once did Joe Bob Blackman ever take a book home. No homework. He never did homework. He said, if I can't get it done in the study hall, it doesn't need to be done. And he could make good grades that way. And I had to do serious homework. So for me, it was a real commitment. And for him, it just meant, yeah, I'll do that. But he didn't change anything. And yet he made good grades and all that. For me, it meant I had to commit myself to serious homework every night. And I did that willingly because I wanted to be like Mr. Warren, who was, and the thing is that if I had not done that, if I had not committed and not truly done the work, that when Bill Potter came along in the next year in my high school career, he probably wouldn't have seen anything if he were developing. So things build. Anyone else have a question?
Not a question.
Yeah. Okay. Conrad.
I speak at these things every year, whether I know the person or not, so maybe I should say something. I moved to Winnsboro at the end of 2005, and roughly a week after I moved here, I found out that people that I knew in Winnsboro were going to be singing at the unveiling of the historical marker at the post office. And being a videographer, I decided to video just them singing. So I brought my camera. I didn't even have a tripod, and I kind of handheld it, and I ended up shooting the whole dedication. And at that, I met Bill Jones for the first time. And some strange-looking man came up to me following the dedication, wearing either a NASA emblem or a Starship Enterprise emblem, I can't remember which, and introduced himself and asked me what church I went to, and I told him, and he was very disappointed. Come to the quintessential country church. I said, well, Joe Dan, I'm a Baptist, I'm not a Methodist. He said, that doesn't make any difference. And anyway, that introduction led to my a really close friendship over the years. That was 11 years ago. What hasn't been mentioned so far is several things. On a table over there are several videos in a book, the Judge Jackson Colored Sacred Heart book that Joe Dan wrote, which I have for sale in my shop. It's an excellent book, very well written book, and very informative about that type of music. Joe Dan plays several instruments. He sings. He's kind of sings in the old Woody Guthrie style, very reminiscent of that style of very, very country, down country, home style singing, very personal singing style. He's a poet, wonderful poet. He helped found the Winnsboro Poet Society, which is hosted every month at my shop. I'm very proud to be part of that. And he is a wonderful spokesman for the Center for the Arts and all of Winnsboro. And it's really been an honor to call him a friend. And hope. Oh, and we celebrated his 80th birthday in my shop too. So,
That's right.
and I'm honored to call you friend, sir, and look forward to many more years.
I always say when I tell people about the Winnsboro Emporium, it is Winnsboro's truly unique store. There's nothing like it here, and I haven't seen anything like it anywhere else. This is a fantastic store, and I wish that there were more traffic there. Some days he has lots of traffic. Other days, when I come in, he sometimes tells me, hey, you're the only sale I make. But there are days when he has lots of traffic. Sometimes I go in there and I can't get his attention for quite a long time. But if you've never been in the Winnsboro Emporium, you really need to start checking it out. Does anyone else have a question?
Bill does.
Yeah, Bill.
Joe Dan, I remember two over-aggressive guys, I believe, when I was in school that were, well, I think they were snoopers for the Tomahawk. Do you remember who those guys were?
What was the name? What was the question about the Tomahawk?
The question was, there was two what they call snoopers then for the Tomahawk. He and Blackburn referred to it.
Yeah, I worked on several of the Tomahawks.
I've got you now.
You think of the snooper and the raider, though, aren't you?
Yeah, and did we call it Tomahawk?
Tomahawk was a
Raider was the yeah, we had snoopers in the gossip page of the Raider newspaper. Oh, and I forgot to say, I was the editor of that my senior year, and the way I became editor was amazing. I took typing under, as I mentioned earlier, I took typing under Mildred Henry, later Edwards. She was still Mildred Henry when I had her. And I learned typing from her, and I also took bookkeeping under her. And we became, I would say, in fact, she called me in class before, in front of everybody. She called me Dr. Boyd. That was her name for me. And, so at the end of my junior year, she said, Joe Dan, I would like for you to be the editor of the Raider next year. And I had worked on the Raider every year, you know, as a reporter or columnist. Joe Bob and I had a humor column in my freshman year and all that. But it never occurred to me that I had potential to be the editor, you know, of the Raider. And I was caught off guard by it. And I said, you know, do you really think that I am up to that? You know, and she said, I think you will be the best editor of the Raider since James Rowland Old. Some of you knew James Rowland Old. He was ahead of me, I don't know how many years. I didn't know him personally. I knew who he was. I knew his brother, younger. He was in my brother's class and all that. But she had high aspirations for me. You know? And again, she saw something in me that I hadn't seen, just like Bill Potter did. And if we don't have those people to inspire us and to see things worth developing, you know, we probably are never going to be anything beyond, certainly we're not going to exceed anyone's expectations. Because I think of those wonderful teachers in my life who inspired me to be more than what I thought I was. And Mildred Henry was one of those who was somehow saw that talent there. And I enjoyed being the editor of the paper. Peggy Ball was on the staff, and Peggy Greenlee was on the staff, Suzanne Green was on the staff. You know, I was working mostly with
Women.
girls. And some of them, and there were some of those who, despite the fact that I had been named editor, who had been, like me, had worked on the Raider for every one of their years in high school, where they had a concept of what the Raider should be, and I had to really fight some of those ladies for what my vision of the Raider, you know. And it worked out, and I don't think I lost any friends or anything. It was just a matter of a slight difference of where the editorial vision was. And the snooper that Bill wrote, of course, that was always the most popular page. I don't remember who it was my senior year. But anyway, does anyone else have a question? Would anybody like to say anything?
Janet, I just want to say that you've talked so much about all the people who have inspired you, and I think I speak for all of us in saying that you've inspired us all today.
What I'd like to do is get a picture of you two presenting both of those awards, if you don't mind, and then if I could get one of all the former Trails of Country Treasures, that would be awesome. So, the two, so I can kill two birds with one stone. So I can kill the bird. I'm sorry. That was.
And Becky?
You want? No, I want that. I want to get one of the four of y'all, the three of y'all giving both of those. And that will help me, because we're going to be really hot in papers this week. Yeah, that'd be perfect. You can just put your hand under both of those awards. There you go. All right. Oh, great. Oh, great. 1, 2, 3. 2. If you'll hold it, I'll get one of your camera too, Mary. All right. And then if you can get all the former winners.
Becky?
Bill?
Bill, Becky. Anybody else? Marianne.
Marianne? We need you. Yeah.
Helen.
It's about time you have some best we can do.
You want them in order?
That would be nice.
Second.
Bill, Helen, Mary Ann, you stand straight to me, you two turn this way, and you two turn that way. So bossy. 1, 2, one more. Let me get one with Joanne's camera. Okay, wait here. 1, 2. One more. 2. Thank you.
Join us for some refreshments. We're chatting.
We have food. Yeah, no, that was,
You have good memories.
I mean, I